What's up, yo? Welcome to Your One Life. I'm your host, Kim Young Kim, and I'm super glad to have you as a listener today. Now, if you're new here, here's what this podcast is all about. This podcast is all about teaching you from the greatest minds in the world, assisting you in all aspects of your life, and helping you become an award winner in your field by creating a fake association that honors your lifetime achievement in telemarketing. It's like the Grammys for dishonest people. Now, a few things to note about this episode. Number one, it is in front of a live audience. We even had a throwable microphone that was used for audience engagement. It was a whole lot of fun, and I want to give a big shout out to Mark Deal and Charles McFall for organizing and putting the event together, and the folks at 800 East Studios in Atlanta, Georgia for hosting the event. Also, in the beginning of the episode, I referenced the description of this show that is in the About section of the podcast that blasts out to all the podcast players. People never read those, so when I started the podcast, I wrote a real quick one and then I forgot to change it. So I'm going to leave it unaltered for a few days so my early listeners can see what happens when you don't put time into your work. Let's go. Just kidding. Let's not go. All right, the last thing. The audio quality on my freestyle rapping section turned out really terribly. I'm pretty sure it had something to do with them running the instrumental through the system that we were recording on. I did my best to salvage it, but if you can't stand the sound quality, then just fast forward through it. All right, so without further ado, here is my interview with Dr. Alex Pauley. I really need to change that, by the way. I didn't know you were going to read that. I'm like, oh, nobody reads that. But Mark Deal just did, so here we are. How's everyone doing today? Whoa, whoa. All right, here we are. Very cool. Well, my name is Kim Young Kim. I'm the host of Your One Life podcast, and this is my guest today, Miss Alex Pauley.
It's actually a doctor. Sorry.
Sorry. Okay. All right.
Didn't go to school for 10 years.
Sorry. I forgot about that part, but here we are. Good deal. Good deal. So, cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Ooh. We're going back to the future. Here we are. Boom. 88 miles per hour. Let's go. In the meantime, I'm going to grab some water. Oh, Alex, you brought your own. There you go.
Did.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm closing. I'm shutting it down. Here we are. All right. Good deal. All right. Are we ready to roll? Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here we are. Very cool. All right. So we're getting started. I'm going to read Alex's intro. I found it somewhere.
Oh no! Now I get to be concerned about which.
No,
none
at all. All right, here we go. All right, here's the intro. Prepare to elevate and change your mental state, because it's time to conquer life with Alexandra the Great. She's here to help you connect your body to your mind and yourself to your purpose so you could be aligned, so you could rise above the mess and the stress. With a yes on your breath, climbing steps to success, you're becoming the best version of yourself that you know you could be. Unearthing the health that helps you feel free. But this is not woo-woo. This is based in science. This is embodiment practices for brain rewiring and quieting the monkey mind through self-regulation with focus on behavior change and self-restoration and actions that you take to calm your nervous system, relaxing in a state so you could live your mission and get a handle on emotions and also your feelings. It's building your resilience to unleash your inner brilliance through a coach and a community. You'll connect and create a better way of living so you could be great. It's now we live life loud and no time for stalling. Let's level up and learn with Dr. Alex Pauley.
Well done.
I had it as Miss Alex Pauley, but dang.
I appreciate it. Yeah. Now I'm going to need that because I need that intro. That was amazing.
Yeah. Thank you. I enjoyed writing it. I enjoyed, getting to know you. And now we're making a podcast. This is crazy, y'all. Woo. Here we are, right?
Yeah.
All right. So, Alex, tell the people.
Yes.
Let's start with the origin story. Where did your parents meet? No, I'm just kidding.
Okay. Well, it all started with a tiny radioactive spider and
Nice.
Oh wait, wrong origin story. So I would have to say that I think probably the best place to start is when everything fell apart. I think a lot of us find that that's where things need to change, is from a place when you lose literally everything. And for me, that happened when I was just 20 years old. So the shortened version is that I was first diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was 2 years old. So from about 18 months to when I was 5, I had a number of issues that went on with my body and was in and out of the hospital, lots of really intense treatments. And then for about 15 years, I was in remission and picture perfect health. But when I was around 19, started to see some symptoms again. Lots of stress was going on in my life. I was a bit estranged from my family at the time, going through a lot of, in some ways, really normal late teens, early 20s turmoil, trying to figure out who I was, where I wanted to go, who I wanted to be, how I wanted to show up in the world. And the stress of all of that time started to physically manifest in my body. And when I was 20, I was re-diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And I started taking a medication, an anti-rheumatic, that 3 weeks later completely changed my life overnight and nearly took my life. That severe allergic reaction, the official diagnosis or the official title is toxic epidermal necrolysis. Without getting too sciencey, toxic, we know this word. Epidermal has to do with the epidermis. That's the top 3 to 4 layers of skin that sits on your dermis, the bottom like 5 to 6 layers of skin. Necrolysis, which necro, right, has to do with death. And so essentially what this did is that it causes ulcers in your mucous membranes and it kills off the cells that hold your epidermis to your dermis. Now, if this affects more than 30% of your body, you have about a 40% mortality rate. And I lost 85% of my epidermis. You wouldn't know that looking at me, even especially
great, by the way.
From further away, but I really am still covered head to toe in really tiny and some large scars. But I think we all have also experienced life enough by this point that we know that the hardest scars to recover from, you can't see on the surface. And so after this happened, I was in the hospital for a month. It also led to a number of other health crises, because anytime your entire body is in survival mode and having to move heaven and earth to just keep you alive, you start to see breakdown in other areas. Our body is not a single system, but a system of systems. And so you start borrowing from one system to help to fix another, and then that system borrows from another and another and another. And so for the next about 10 years, my entire 20s, which don't worry, I still did plenty of dumb 20s stuff, but I was also dealing with 1 to 2 eye surgeries a day. I'm still technically legally blind, but throughout that time period, I was dealing with a lot of scar tissue, not just on my skin, but on my eyes. I was also trying to recover in terms of all of these systems in my life. And because of that, I really should have done what I think we consistently tell people in their 20s to do, which is to rest and savor life and learn things. And I listened to, like every other person in their 20s, none of that, and continued to run at full speed ahead. I said, okay, life wants to stop me and slow me down. Great. I'm going to double my pace. Not only am I going to work a full-time job, putting myself through my undergraduate degree, but I'm going to get multiple promotions and in fact, try and get a managerial position. Not only am I going to then decide to go to graduate school, but I'm just going to dive straight into a complete joint MA PhD program while still working and doing all of these other things in my life. So
you're trying to make everybody feel bad right now, right?
I'm genuinely trying to get across a very close to my heart point that we don't need to do that. To say that I was an overachiever, which is where I'm going with this, is to put it mildly. I've never known how to slow down. I've never known how to not be a doer. And so I kept doing. And that started to cause even more problems. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us, when we get into our 30s, 40s, for some of us, it waits until our 50s, but we will start to notice the effects of not just stress, right? Stress in and of itself can inherently be a good thing until we have a little too much of it. But any type of chronic stress on our system is going to cause a lot of problems. Mm-hmm. And so this chronic stress over time kept building and building and building for me because I refused to slow down.
Sure.
And that meant that I was living in constant fight or flight mode. So my cortisol levels were off the charts consistently.
Yeah.
And they really had been for most of my life, just the way that I'd grown up and a couple other factors. But I lived in this fight or flight. But the thing about the nervous system is you can only produce so much cortisol, and then your body starts to steal from the other hormonal systems in your body to create more cortisol. But when it's depleted all of those different ways of making cortisol, you just plummet. And so I went into this period of time that we are now talking a little bit more about called functional freeze, where all of your effort in a day will go to, say, your job, whatever that is, to this one thing in your life. And you keep putting everything you have. But the second that that is off, you collapse. So if you're someone who is on it at your job all day long, but when you get home, the only energy that you have is to scroll through your phone, binge watch a TV show, and eat whatever's convenient in the fridge, you might be in functional freeze.
Yeah.
And the real turning point for me was a yoga class that I went to where we're lying in Shavasana at the end of yoga class. It's very beautiful. That particular teacher loved to do little guided meditations or thoughts to think about during that time period. And that day, she said to us, as you breathe in the words, I am sublime. And as you breathe out the words, I am worthy. And in that moment, even in my own head, my thoughts could not form the word worthy. You know, you're saying I'm doing all of this stuff, but somewhere deep inside, because of what I'd been through, I could not see myself as worthy.
Yeah.
And I knew something had to change.
Right. So that's this is the climax of the movie, if this is a movie, right? So
still a little bit more to go.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So or a turning point, let's call
turning
it.
Point, yeah.
So what actually changed? Was it Tony Robbins perhaps? No.
No. So I started to rethink my relationship with myself. And, you know, I started to look at practices that made me feel more connected to myself, that made me feel better in the moment. I started to build trust in my own body. Yoga was a big part of that because it can be very meditative, but it's also this practice that as you come back to it again and again, it's very clear to see when you are making progress. And a lot of that progress is very mental. You know, we think about yoga in the West as being something where you're trying to put your foot behind your head and stand on your hands at the same time. But traditionally, and the ancient practice of yoga is really mostly breath work, meditation, coming into your body to experience your full self.
Right.
So I started doing these embodiment practices, and I also started to notice another thing that I was doing to myself, which was in the healthcare industry, we use a lot of language that is the language of battle, the language of war.
Battle. Okay.
Battle.
Okay. I thought you said bowel. I was like, ugh, do we? All right.
That's only certain parts of the healthcare system. But no, we use this language of war. We talk about fighting things. We're survivors. We're warriors. We're against stuff. And rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune condition. So technically, yes, my immune system was attacking healthy soft tissues in my body. And so I would consistently think, my body's attacking itself. My body's at war with itself. I'm at war with my body. And I made a very conscious decision about 5 years ago to change that language. And instead of saying, I'm at war with myself, I started to say, I'm working to make peace with myself. I think I got this next idea from Esther Perel, where she talks about how if you are in conflict or an argument with someone that you care about, instead of thinking of it as me against you, thinking of it as us against the problem. And so I started to say, I'm on the same team as my body.
Sure.
And while there were a lot of other shifts that were happening there, shifts in terms of, yes, I was making nutrition changes, lifestyle changes, mindset changes, right? Relationship shifts in my life, changing where I lived and who I spent my time with. So those changes were happening too. And all of that came together to create big shifts. But I think that change of being on the same team as my body was a really big piece of it. And in 2021, the same year that I graduated with my PhD, I went into remission with my arthritis.
Nice.
And I started to feel better. Everything started to look better. But it wasn't until I made one more mindset shift, one more lifestyle shift, that I would say everything truly and completely shifted. So this wasn't a one turning point, but a multi-turning point that finally culminated in this moment of allowing, through this connection to myself, through this connection to my body, to also connect to my purpose. I think that when we come here, we all have something that we are intended to learn, to experience, or to do in this life. And for me, even when I was very young, I felt like I knew what that was, but society kept saying, no, you need to do this and this and this, right? I'm a millennial, which means that
millennials, let's go.
Yes, we got told that very here is your formula to get to happily ever after, right? I think happily ever after, probably one of the worst phrases to happen to the millennial generation and Gen X. But yeah, so I tried to do all of the, quote, right things. And I was still so unhappy. I was teaching full time. I got to spend some time doing market research. All of my research was attitude change, behavior change. And I kept looking at this and being like, how is it that I've filled out this formula? I've done all my checklist. I know all the things. And I don't like my life. I'm still kind of tired every day. I'm still not enjoying this. And I had this experience with a dear friend of mine who does these guided spiritual journeys. And I've always been first and foremost a scientist. So woo woo and I, we have a complicated relationship.
Sure.
But she reached out to me to join this one group where she needed an extra person. And it came at a time when so much else was happening, transition in my life. And I said yes. And that one journey, that one night, I woke up the next day and I was like, no, I have to live my purpose. I have to live in alignment with who I am, with what I'm here to do, and with the things that truly serve me.
Sure.
And from that point forward, life became filled for me with a lot of ease, with a lot of fulfillment. It's as if every day feels like this beautiful gift. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but it's how I felt. And so the work that I do now is helping others to use these embodiment practices, to use these mindset shifts, to connect more deeply to themselves, to connect more deeply to their purpose, and just as importantly, to connect to their community, because we're not islands, right? We are connected to each other, and we have to be in this together, especially in this particular time period.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I started to do the work that I do.
No, that's great. And I mean, it's very empowering to hear your story and hear you come out on the other end of it, just, better and more whole and all of those things. I am curious because you talk about, a lot of this but it's a little philosophical as we talk about it, right? Which I'm all about philosophical. I'm also all about practical because I'm trying to fix my life yesterday. I don't know about y'all, but that's me. So what are like concrete things that people can do in the moment? Let's say you talked about fight or flight earlier, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're feeling fight or flight because, somebody ate your Twinkie, right? That happens. I don't know what happens at y'all's workplace, but that's
rude.
Right? So you're feeling these feelings, you're spiraling. What do you do?
So I will say, I think a lot of the language that we have right now, because of social media in particular, and the way that we have begun to communicate with each other in very short sentences, short phrases, short clips, short means of discussing things, we get into a habit of trying to make everything convenient and to make everything one size fits all. So I do have a much, much longer answer for that that is going to be really tailored to the person that's in front of me. Right? Because of especially the things that I went through as a really young kid, I'm not neurotypical, right? Everyone else in my family, very, very neurotypical. Me, not so much. My body went through a little bit more. And so my brain wired a little differently. And so because of that, I'm very attuned to the fact that depending on who you are, what the moment is happening, that answer is going to be a little different.
Sure.
However, there are collections of practices that we can think about when we're having this moment. Two of my main types of practices that I teach people are breath work and somatic movement.
And what is somatic movement actually?
And essentially all that's somatic just means in your body, right? And so we're using this term right now, somatic movement or somatic release. We're using that as a label for different kinds of movements that you can do in your body that's going to release energy in some way. So different somatic practices can sometimes be associated with different emotions needing to be released. So for example, what you described as anger. So two really simple practices that I would immediately say to go into is number one, do you have, just curling your hands into very light fists, thumbs on the outside, don't want to hurt yourself, and just very lightly kind of tapping. And because your quadricep muscles, right? Sorry, I forget we are audio. I am touching the tops of my thighs. So just, you can lightly tap, but your thighs can actually take quite a bit of pressure. So you can actually get in there and just like back and forth, one thigh than the other.
Yeah.
And so that's doing two things. Number one, your quadriceps, because of where they are in your body, they're one of the first things to tense up when you're angry or feeling that fight or flight need. Because your body is literally going to start sinking in your hips, being prepared to run or to fight somebody.
Right.
So the act of kind of tapping or punching your thighs, your quadriceps, that's the tops and the outer sides of your thighs, is going to start to release some of that, to get some of that cortisol that's starting, that adrenaline that's pumping into those muscles, to be like, okay, we don't actually need to be here. It's fine.
Sure.
There's, someone who ate my Twinkie, not a bear. So probably okay. And then the second piece of that is when you're tapping yourself, alternating, you're also doing something called bilateral stimulation. Bi meaning two, lateral meaning side to side. So the two sides of your body, if you're tapping or in other ways stimulating the two sides of your body, you're essentially resetting your brain. You're telling your brain, oh, I need to pay attention to this half of my body, right? If I'm tapping the right half of my body, the left half of my brain goes, ooh, we're doing something. And if I'm tapping the left side of my body, my right side of my brain goes, ooh, we're doing something. And this means your brain kind of gets confused and it does a little bit of a reset. And it's like, oh, wait, I have to stay present in this moment. I can't be predicting what I'm going to do next. I have to notice.
Sure.
And so in that noticing, it gives you that moment to pause.
That's good. And do you recommend like making eye contact with the person you're angry at and doing this?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. All right.
I think one of my favorite things that my therapist, I've, like I said, I've done all of the things. I believe in medication. I believe in meditation. I believe in therapy. I believe in group support, like all of these things. But one of my favorite practices that I got from my therapist is she's like, when you're feeling upset and the anger part of your grief at this specific person at the time is coming out, go for a walk. And while you're walking, imagine if this were a movie and you were a murderer, all of the things you do.
Oh, nice.
Because as you're walking, you're releasing cortisol. You're getting that emotion of anger out of your system. Okay. So I would not look at that person, mostly because that person would probably look back at you and it'd be very uncomfortable. They'd be like, what is this crazy person doing, tapping their thighs and staring at me? But yeah, movement is going to be helpful. And the second piece of that is breath work, because once you've released, then it can be really helpful to slow everything down. So you've turned on your sympathetic, right? That fight or flight system. And now you're slowing down your heart rate, slowing down your breath to then move or switch back on into your parasympathetic so that you can kind of think through stuff and decide what to do. That actually reminds me. Another fun little thing that I think now we actually have started teaching kids, which is really cool, is that so if everyone, both at home and here, wants to take their hand and open it up, flat palm, close your fingers together, kind of like a blade. Now take your thumb into your palm and then cover your thumb with your fingers. Now, your fingers we'll think of as the prefrontal cortex. That's your thinking part of your brain. That thumb that's tucked inside, we'll think about as the limbic system, the emotional center of your brain. And then we'll think about this like little base of your palm, the start of your wrist, as your brain stem. That's like your lizard brain, your monkey mind, right? This is pure instinct. When you get triggered by stress, by something coming at you, someone says boo in a scary movie, right? Any of these things, open up your palm completely. Your thinking part of your brain and your emotional part of your brain go completely offline. A lot of times when we say that someone is being overly emotional, we're not actually talking about their emotions. We are making an assumption that they are in the brainstem. They are in that instinctual fight or flight part of themselves, which means, they could do anything. They could fight. They could flee. They could light things on fire. We don't know, because they're literally not having emotions, which can be processed, and they're not having their thoughts, which can be turned into something. The only way of accessing the brainstem is through your body.
Okay.
The only way at all. If someone is in that state, if you've known someone in that state, if you've been in that state, you kind of know. People tell you to calm down. You can't even process those words properly. So the only way to bring back on the thumb, the emotional center, and the fingers, the brain, like the thinking, what we think of as we are humans, we think through things, we're logical. Yeah. That part of your brain, the only way to bring that back online is to do things through your body. And so that's why things like tapping, like breathing deeply, our diaphragm sits underneath of our lungs, but it also works directly with something called our vagus nerve, which is actually a lot of nerves that it goes directly to our brainstem, tells us, hey, we're actually calm. We're actually safe. We don't need to be in fight or flight. We can bring our emotions back online. We can bring our thoughts back online. And so, so the body, all of the practices that in that question, it's all going to be body practices, slowing down your breath, releasing some of that cortisol so that it doesn't get stuck anywhere in your body. So,
yeah, for sure. Oh, sure. I just
just wanted to say, I'm trying not to cry. I've been in chronic pain for a year and a half now. And it's arthritis of the spine. Arthritis of the spine. I have a couple tears and bulging discs and stuff that just won't heal. I think the hardest part is people can't see that until you do break down. And so being here is so random today, and you being here, so I appreciate it. And I'll probably want to talk to you. But yeah, it's a hard thing to get through, and the timing is crazy. But yes, thank you.
Yeah.
See? Woo! Thank you for that. I'm kind of in a place in my life where I don't believe in coincidences. So I'm so glad you're here, and thank you for sharing that. It is hard. It is hard when we can't see that. And a lot of, I think, what we experience right now, we live in this society, we live in this culture, especially in the United States. We don't talk about our emotions. We don't talk about when things are hard. We're always pushing. That's why I told that part of my story, because I don't think that I'm unique in that. And in my own work with the clients that I've worked with, I've started to see that as a pattern. When I first started this work, I specifically wanted to work with people with chronic illnesses. What I found is that a lot of people with chronic illness don't identify as having a chronic illness, right? If you're taking medication for high blood pressure, you have a chronic illness, right? We don't think about it that way. Diabetes, chronic illness, right? Some type of mental health issues are often going to be chronic illness. But I started to see this overlap between people who had chronic health conditions or chronic mental conditions and overachievers. Also, I'm personally an only child, but I think that we only children, especially as women, also tend to have eldest daughter syndrome. So that kind of like eldest daughter syndrome comes out anytime where we, especially as young kids or in our earlier adult years, have been asked to take on so much emotional labor, so much of the doing labor that corporate America asks of us these days. In my case, both corporate America and then academia, which is honestly a little worse. But we're asking so much of our bodies that is technically possible, but then we're not expressing or releasing the things that need to be expressed and released. And we're not sharing those things with other people. And we are inherently, biologically, sociologically, community-based creatures. And so when we do not have those personal individual outlets, when we don't have those physical outlets, and we don't have those community spaces as an outlet, it starts to manifest physically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, COVID taught us that, right? We were just locked up in our houses, and I'm going to admit something, and I might delete this out of the podcast. I have a machete. I have a machete at my house, and I went outside and I was chopping up my bushes like a maniac. And
that's awesome.
I mean, I didn't know what to do with myself. No, everything was fine.
I meant on accident.
Yeah, indeed. No, and I mean, yeah, I probably made it in a couple TikToks. Who knows? Yeah. But anyways,
no, I think that's great because the second I had said I had 2 somatic things to tell you about. The other one is grabbing a towel or a pillow, pulling it up over your head, inhaling, and as you exhale, throwing it on the floor. It's another great release.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like a Dutch oven, sort of.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. Sorry.
No, absolutely not. Not at all.
Okay. All right.
But similar to your machete.
Yeah.
Letting that physically out of your body.
No, that's great. And I want to talk a little more about breath work because, it's super helpful and important. I heard somewhere that rich people actually breathe less than we do. Is that true? That's why they're successful? I don't know.
I doubt it. So I will say the more stressed you are, the faster you will tend to breathe.
Mm-hmm. Does that help? Like breathing faster?
No.
Okay.
No. Breathing. Okay. We're gonna do more fun. How do I explain things so people back home know what I'm physically doing? Time. So if you think about your rib cage, your lungs sit inside your rib cage, and underneath, keep hitting this thing, underneath of your rib cage is this big dome or umbrella shaped muscle called your diaphragm. Anyone here ever done like performance work, right? Stage work, speak with your diaphragm, getting to the back of the theater, right? That's the muscle that you're using. And the way that breathing works, the science of breathing is kind of like a jellyfish. When you inhale, that dome-shaped muscle, like the top of the jellyfish, will sink down. So when you're breathing in, the muscle is actually sucking air into your lungs. It's pulling down so that air starts to come into your lungs. And when you exhale, the muscle is actually releasing, and it's releasing up, kind of like a jellyfish propelling itself. Right?
Okay.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is this massive muscle that sits just underneath of your lungs is also sitting on top of your organs. And straight through that, you have what I just talked about earlier, which is the vagus nerve. Mm-hmm. The vagus nerve is a lot of nerves, but we collectively call it that. And it has 2 main components. It comes from that brain stem part, the low part of your brain by your neck. And one part of it reaches out and touches your face. So technically, when you make faces, that is giving information to your brainstem. And a lot of, if you've ever met someone who's like what they're thinking always shows up on their face, I'm guilty, totally. You will always know how I feel about you. It's because the brainstem is making your face do things, right? It's also why disgust and fear are 2 of the hardest things to hide on our faces because they're so closely linked. The other part of the vagus nerve goes straight down in front of your spine and comes through a pocket in your diaphragm. So every time that you breathe, because it has to go through the diaphragm to get to your organs, because that's the job that it does. It makes sure that all of your organs keep functioning. Because of that, anytime your diaphragm moves, it's sending signals to your brainstem. So this works 2 ways, both in terms of when you are stressed.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Both in terms of when you are stressed, you will automatically start to breathe faster and you'll start to breathe higher up in your chest, right? So think about this. I'm a pedestrian, right? Nobody wants me driving, I promise. Not with my eyesight. So I'm walking outside. I'm going to cross the street. I have the light. I go to step off the curb. Someone squeals around the corner and rushes right past me. Instinct. I'm going to jump back. I'll probably gasp in through my mouth maybe even clutch my pearls that I'm not wearing today. But that is a very instinctual response. That quick gasp, high in my chest, through my mouth, right? But when I'm nice and calm and relaxed, you'll start to notice you breathe lower in your body. Your breaths are longer. Oftentimes we'll talk about deep breathing. People think big breaths. That's not what we're talking. We literally mean deeper into the body. That means your diaphragm is turning on. Mm-hmm. So that is a natural response that we have. And the thing is, we can manipulate our brainstem in the opposite direction. So if we say want our bodies to like have some cortisol, you'll see like some athletes, right? They pump themselves up. Right. My first career before all of this crazy health stuff happened, I was an actress and I studied Shakespeare and how to be a Shakespearean performer. One of the things that Shakespeare did that was so brilliant as he wrote these kinds of things into the sides, the script. So for example, if he wanted someone on stage to start getting agitated and angry, you might notice now, if you ever have the desire to go read or watch something Shakespearean, that person will suddenly get a lot of words that start with H's. Right? And that signals to your brain, I need to be on alert. I need to be agitated. I need to have more cortisol pumping to my muscles. Right?
Interesting.
And the opposite is true. You can use longer, deeper breaths. You can even use breath holds to start to calm your system, because your literal system will say, if I'm able to have a long, luxurious breath, I must be safe.
So, okay. Let's put it in practical terms. So when you say a breath hold, right?
Yeah.
You how many seconds do you breathe in? How long do you hold it? Like, you know?
So that's where it starts to get tricky. You know, we have so many different types of breath practices, and all it really comes down to is the same 3 breath practices. And they're all just versions of the same thing. And the reason we give them so many different techniques is every brain, every body is a little different.
Mine's a lot different, but
yeah. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to find the version that's going to keep your brain occupied enough to actually do the thing. So we have 3 different versions of breath practices. The first is that fast breathing. If you do need a little pep in your step, you can kind of that faster, quicker breathing. I'm doing that through my nose, but especially if you do it out through your mouth, like that's going to really pump you up. If you already have trouble with high cortisol and stress, do not recommend for pregnant women, right? Do not recommend for anyone with cardiovascular issues. But that is one breath practice. And it's to activate your autonomic nervous system, that sympathetic and parasympathetic that I was just talking about. The second breath practice is going to be balancing. A lot of people will say a 3-3 or a 4-4 breath, but literally all you're doing is you're getting yourself to even out your inhales and exhales. That's it. Whatever version of that works with your brain in that moment, perfect. Do that. And then the third one, which is the calming, is going to be that slower exhale. And what you're doing with that slower exhale is you are releasing more carbon dioxide than you are inhaling oxygen.
Is that good for the environment? I'm just kidding. Sorry.
Everyone should have plants.
Nice.
Buy plants for your home. Carry one with you.
Yeah.
This is useful because oftentimes when we're having panic attacks or anxiety starts to come into our body, there is a little neurotransmitter in our brain that is saying, so here's the thing. Our body reacts on, we do not have enough oxygen. But the signal that creates that is actually triggered by too much carbon dioxide. And so sometimes those two things can get crossed. So our body will believe that we don't have enough oxygen because it's perceiving that we have a higher amount of carbon dioxide than we actually have. So a lot of times when people start to hyperventilate or have a panic attack, their body is literally telling them you need more air because you have too much carbon dioxide. But what happens when you're breathing super fast is you might accidentally over-oxygenate yourself, which has this, kind of glitchy, unfortunate thing where it also tells your brain that you have too much carbon dioxide and need more oxygen. It just becomes this pattern that's really hard to break until you literally pass out. And when you pass out, it resets that neurotransmitter and your body goes, oh, okay, I'm going to breathe normal again.
Okay.
So you can hold your breath there.
Right.
And when you hold your breath and you let that carbon dioxide build up, that can also trigger that same glitch in the neurotransmitter.
So in practical terms, let's say freaking out, I need to, I guess, exhale more carbon dioxide than I do. Do I do like a 4-8 or do I, what am I doing exactly?
Again, that's going to depend on the person. And that's why I teach so many different versions of that. Because, for example, when I was in my breath coach training, I did tons of certifications. I mean, I'm an academic. What do you expect? But when I was doing that particular training, they started with the 4-8 breath, in for 4, out for 8. Always counts, not seconds. That means you can speed it up or slow it down, how works for you. But they always started with that. And yet when I do a 4-8 breath in my body, it makes me more stressed. That long exhale, for whatever reason, is really hard for me. So instead of doing that, I always switch over to a triangle breath. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4.
Right.
For whatever reason, my brain chemistry is much better with that slight hold than with the long exhale.
Okay.
And the one that, unfortunately, a lot of providers will go straight to, that a lot of people have a lot of stress around, is the box breathing. The in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. That hold on the exhale can actually be more activating on your system. And so that's why there are so many, right? The 4-7-8 is another one. The physiologic sigh, which is actually the first one I teach. And I'm happy to teach that probably maybe at the end of the session today. I think that's a great one to go home with. But all of these are really just doing the exact same thing. And that's why it's so helpful not to just know one tool, not to just have this one thing you always come back to, because it may not always work and it may not be the most effective version of that tool for your body.
Got it. Yeah, for sure. And I actually use the 4-7-8 when I'm trying to go back to sleep. It seems to work pretty well. And so, yeah, I do want to touch on sleep, and we're running short on time. So yeah. I do. So sorry, I missed what you said.
I made a joke. It's fine.
Okay, no worries. So getting a good night's sleep is so important, of course, right? It's one of the ways that we combat stress, because being sleep deprived is stressful. So what are practices that people can do in order to, obviously get a good night's sleep, stay asleep, all of those things? I mentioned the 4-7-8 works for me. What else can we do? Don't look at your phone. Understood.
Blue light, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love this. So obviously there's another, again, long list of practices that you can go to and look at.
Sure.
But I'm going to give you a few very specific ones that I have been especially excited about lately.
Is it NyQuil? Because I use NyQuil sometimes.
No, okay. nor is it Nicki Minaj.
Okay.
Thank you for those who understood that joke. So the two, okay, so I'm going to give you 3 big things. The very first thing is to figure out how you personally unwind. And I am so sorry, but scrolling social media is not it.
Facts.
Stage whisper, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry. Oftentimes when we are scrolling social media, or we're watching YouTube videos, or we're binge watching something, when we think about what our bodies, our brains, our selves are trying to get out of that is a couple things. We're trying to feel calmer. Yes. We're also trying to feel connected.
Sure.
So a practice that I will highly recommend is to find a good night buddy. For some of us, maybe you have, no, right. I don't mean it in that context. Let me continue.
All right.
Maybe you have that version of a good night buddy. Good for you. Maybe that person exists in your house. But for a lot of us, we still live alone, or we, live with a roommate that we're not particularly close to, or any versions of this, but finding someone that you do get to send a good night text to, or have a good night phone call with, someone that you can reach out to and have a meaningful connection to in the evening, that's going to produce a certain amount of feel-good hormones in the brain. That's going to tell your brain you're safe, you're connected, you're in a good place. So that's one of the first things that I'll say when you're finding your wind down is find your people you can connect to.
Okay. Mark deal. Good night, buddy. Yeah. No. All right. Okay.
So finding that connection, we are, a little history. When I was in academia, I studied political science, and I studied media effect and attitude change. And I studied a lot about how we get so tied up in parasocial relationships that our physical life relationships start to suffer, not just to other people, but also to ourselves. And so using social media as a means of bolstering those relationships is great, but using them to supplant or instead of those real life relationships can put us physically, right, brain chemistry wise, into some little murky waters. And so having that connection before bed is so important. Yes, there are a lot of other things, having a cool bedroom, using a weighted blanket, drinking milk before bed, or sleepy time tea, avoiding blue light. All of these things are great. And when it comes to physically falling asleep, another thing that I think is really great is learning how to mimic how your brain falls asleep. So a practice that I love, whether it's you have trouble falling asleep or you wake up in the middle of the night, is and this is apparently something that they used in the military that speaking of social media, does have good things I found on social media, is that you can start to mimic how your brain gets super erratic when you're falling asleep, and that'll make it easier to fall asleep. So for example, 2 versions of this. The first version is to literally just start letting your brain wander and naming all the things that it does, right? Let's say we start with squirrel, blue, asparagus, rhomboids, hair, shoes, chicken.
I have all of those in my room, by the way. So that would be perfect.
Including a chicken?
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
Don't ask.
So you literally create, because your brain isn't trying to make sense of things when it's trying to fall asleep. It's trying to get into that wavelength. For some of us, though, we'll start to get in our heads, pun intended, about that. So another thing is you could say, okay, I'm going to choose a word. Again, we'll start with squirrel. And I'm going to choose words that start with S until I run out. And the second that your brain pauses, you move to the next thing. Like, you don't try to search for it. You don't try to attach to anything. So it would be like socks. And I've lost
smelly
S,
socks.
Right? Smelly socks, right?
Yeah.
And then immediately a Q, quiet.
Yeah.
Right. So you just keep kind of going down that pattern. So that's another really, really great thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're about out of time.
And breath. It's relaxing
and
breath patterns.
Okay.
4, 7, 8. Right. That's, which for people who don't know what 4, 7, 8 is, you in for 4, hold for 7, out for 8.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Seconds, not minutes, guys. Thank you. Just making sure.
Correct. None of us are free divers.
Yeah. Don't die trying to fall asleep. All right. So I'm shutting it down. I'm gonna do a little thing that I do with an instrumental in the background, and then we're gonna shut it down, and then we're gonna do it. All right.
No, I know.
Talk about techniques. So I can that person that goes static in my mind, come through and I find a whole bunch of things, and I answer find a whole bunch of messages that I gotta send myself all the time, and that's what I'm saying. Talk about Alex, dropping a bunch of knowledge about the negative words to the freestyle. Yo, you just observe your own thoughts. Don't get in it. I come straight through. Can't be as soon as you gotta understand this life is your own, and that's what I'm saying. Your body is your home, where you gotta be all the time. Yo, you're working for yourself. That's what I find. Coming up the top, talking about this lady. She is a doctor. Come straight through. And yo, what just doctor rhymes all the time. It's about breathing up in your mind, holding the thought. You all come through. Words that I drop. Yo, with this true. I'm spitting out the top. And that's how I go. Dr. Alex Pauley, up in the flow. Thank you. All right, here's the deal. We want to find you online to have parasympathetic or parasocial relationships with you. I look at your stories and say, hey, yeah, we're going to keep doing this. So share all the places people can find you online. Do you have a MySpace? No.
I do not have a MySpace, a MyFace.
Yeah, all of those. So how can people connect with you online? And I will tag all of this, of course, in the show notes.
Perfect. The best two places are going to be, first off, alexpauley.com, ALEX. My last name is Paul, like the man's name, PAULEY. So alexpauley.com. So a lot of information there, both about the one-on-one work that I do, the group coaching program and membership that I have starting in April, and then also corporate wellness talks that I give.
Yeah.
The second place.
And you speaking and coaching. Okay. Yeah. Exactly.
And then the second place that you can find me, I think I've mentioned multiple times now, I'm a millennial. So I think you already know where I'm going with this. Instagram. But that's going to be Alex C. Pauley. So C as in Charlie.
Word.
So, yeah. So those are the two best places to find me.
Okay. Very cool. Well, Alex, thank you so much for the conversation. Thank you all for coming through and hanging out and sharing and all those things.
Thank you all.
All right.
And thanks to, I'm going to call you Dr. Kim Young in the very Dre style.
Yeah.
For the lovely intro and outro.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. All right. Peace.
Wait, before y'all get it, let me get a picture of y'all there with the audience. And there.
Hey, look like you're happy right now. Yeah.
Wave your arms like it's the best.
Like what? Very cool. All right. Thank y'all.
Until we make it.
Yep. All right. So that's the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot from it. And I hope you take the advice Dr. Pauley shares with you in this episode and apply it to your life. If you're new here, don't forget to hit follow so you don't miss future episodes. And if you've been listening, please leave a review in Apple Podcasts. That helps out a lot with the show, with visibility, and also getting good guests to come on the show. Also, if you listen on Spotify, you can leave a comment on Spotify. That's a new feature that they have. And also, please share the Spotify link or other links through your Instagram and Facebook stories and through any other platforms that you use. All right, so that's all I got for this episode. This is Your One Life. I'm Kim Young Kim. I hope you have a great day, a great week, and until next time, peace.